Did you know that there is an area on your body that if you touch it and get hurt, it could kill you? Today, we tell you where the Triangle of Death is and what it is. This is not a horror movie or a dangerous area of the world. The Triangle of Death is the part of your face that includes the upper lip and the top of your nose, thus forming a triangle. The gloomy name it receives is due to the serious risks involved in squeezing a pimple or wound in this area. Popping a pimple is never advisable, but doing so carries a higher risk of serious infection, which in some cases can be fatal. Do you want to identify it exactly? Make a triangle with your hands so that the point formed by the index fingers is in the middle of the eyebrows and the lower corners are at the corners of the mouth. That is the area where you should never touch your acne. The consequences could range from damaging our vision, suffering from meningitis, brain abscesses, or death. So we must be very careful with what we do in this area. We have found a real case of a young Brazilian woman who had an infection in the Triangle of Death. It will leave you shocked. Layane Diaz was celebrating having obtained a work internship and was planning a trip with her family. But what she didn't imagine was that she was about to go through the worst stage of her life at just 20 years old. Days before starting her internship, she began to feel very strong pain in her back. She took several medications, but nothing calmed her down. She felt weak and ended up rejecting that job opportunity since she didn't feel strong enough to face it. She took some medication and the pain went down. But the following days, the back pain became more intense again. She spent several days like this until she decided to go to the doctor. They performed an X-ray on her back, but the doctor didn't see any abnormalities, even though the young woman continued to have intense pain in that part of the body. Since they didn't find anything strange, they sent her home. The next day, after waking up from a nap, she could no longer feel her legs. The young woman stated that she didn't feel anything from her chest down. They immediately took her to the hospital. The doctors ordered a blood and urine test, and the results showed that she had a blood infection. The doctor felt her leg, but she didn't feel anything. Her case was classified as serious, and she was transferred to another hospital. The pain became stronger, but the doctors couldn't give her an exact diagnosis. She had to take morphine to cope with the pain, but it also caused hallucinations, and one of the doctors stopped the treatment. An MRI showed she had 500 millimeters of pus between 3 vertebrae present on her spinal cord. The doctors urgently operated on her to remove the fluid. According to her story, the neurosurgeon who treated her explained that a bacteria called Staphylococcus aureus, which transmits diseases through the blood, had entered her body through an infection. He asked her if she had had any wounds on her nose because it was common for them to occur in the nostrils. And Layane replied that she had gotten a nose piercing the previous month. Then the doctor told her the piercing wound was the doorway for the bacteria to enter your body. That left her perplexed. A simple piercing? She already had several, but the previous month she had decided to get one in the left side of her nose. And she remembered that she had gotten blood during the piercing. Her nose became swollen and red, but she didn't think anything of it. She thought it was just a pimple. The surgeon told her that although it was rare, a piercing could cause paraplegia. The surgery that the young woman underwent was aimed at removing the pus that was compressing her spinal cord. And that procedure stopped the progression of the paraplegia. By removing the fluid, the spinal cord was decompressed and the back pain stopped. She had to stay in the hospital for 2 months before being discharged. And there began one of the most difficult moments of overcoming, accepting that she would need a wheelchair for life, since they didn't know if she could ever be able to walk again. To this day, she still has this same condition, but she has learned to be happy despite her limitations. The young woman made her case public by telling her experience on Instagram. The story quickly went viral and began to gain followers. The Brazilian said she was not telling her story to prevent people from getting a piercing, but to make them be careful around the Triangle of Death area. And if you do get a piercing there, choose the professional carefully and make sure that he or she complies with all hygienic and sanitary standards. Another well-known case was that of the actor Sebastián Almada. The Uruguayan had a pimple on his nose and tried to pop it with his fingers. Since nothing came out, he pricked it with a needle to make the pus come out. What seemed to be a most harmless act turned out to be a nightmare. Within 2 weeks, the man ended up admitted to the hospital. When he pricked the granite with the needle, bacteria entered his blood. And from the blood, it went to his lungs. He was in a very serious situation. They removed a liter of pus from his left lung, operated on it, and removed the infection he had in his pleura. However, the doctors couldn't find the problem, and the infection continued. Without knowing the origin, they didn't give him the antibiotic he needed. He spent a month in therapy, in a very serious situation, the pimple on his nose and the bacteria that had gotten into his blood. Thanks to having treated him in time, the Uruguayan managed to get out of the situation unharmed. He himself gave public interviews telling his incredible story and showing that you should never touch a wound in this area of the face. But why is the Triangle of Death so dangerous? It receives this name because of the importance of the blood vessels that cross the area. The venous return of blood in this area occurs through a superficial vein called the angular vein, which, starting from the labial commissures, extend along the entire nasal wing, finally ending, after penetrating into the interior of the skull, through the internal angle of the eye and the orbital cavity, to the cavernous sinus. So that you understand it better, let's say that in this part of the face there is a highway that goes directly to our brain. So, if bacteria gets in there, they could access this important organ with serious consequences. If we have a pimple in this area, we exploit it and create a wound. We can contaminate the area and bacteria can enter and attack us. It isn't the most common, but there are recorded cases of people who have died from having exploded and infected grains within this triangle. And many more who have been seriously hospitalized or with serious health problems. As strange as it may sound, a superficial-looking lesion in this area of the skin is capable of impairing the function of the angular vein. The consequences could be the following: brain abscesses, which would be a type of pus that causes inflammation of the brain; damage to eye function, including paralysis of the eye muscles; deterioration of facial nerves; stroke; pneumonias; meningitis and encephalitis symptoms; infected blood clots or thrombosis. Some dermatologists have clarified that the deeper the pimple and the more infected it is, the greater the risk. The first symptoms and signs that something is wrong include severe headache, fever, seizures, and inflammation of the periphery of the eye. If we have a pimple in this area, the correct thing is to follow the instructions the dermatologists offer us. Don't touch them with your fingers to avoid further infection. Have a facial cleansing appropriate to our type of acne. And, in severe cases, go to a specialist to help us control them. A balanced diet and a daily facial cleansing routine help prevent further pimple prevention. Although it is true that sometimes they can arise due to hormonal changes, stages such as puberty or moments with a high level of stress. In most cases, these pimples will heal on their own a few days later. However, if the injury in the Triangle of Death persists for many days, causing severe pain, and we see that the infection is getting worse, it is time to go to a specialist. And above all, we must pay attention to any changes or new symptoms such as chills or fever. For this same reason, many healthcare professionals are not in favor of performing nose piercings. In most cases, specialists correctly disinfect the area and the hole is made with completely sterilized instruments. However, there is always the risk of subsequent infection and with fatal consequences. With all this, we don't want you to panic, TikTakers. This doesn't mean that by getting a piercing or popping a pimple on your nose one day, you're going to die. But technically, it can happen, and it has happened. It is a low risk, but not impossible. Furthermore, without being so extreme, one of the most common consequences of this highly ill-advised practice, such as exploding pimples, is that we are left with scars, causing something that could last a few days and disappear without a problem, turning into a lifelong scar. The important thing is that after knowing this information, you will avoid doing it again, and you will remember to clean the area to avoid infections. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, and if you want to see more Draw My Life videos, subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode!